What's everybody? Welcome back to the Grand Torino. I'm delighted to introduce to you today Dr. E. Michael Jones. I'm just going to get down to the brass tacks because our time is short, our time is limited, and we have a lot to cover. And I think it's very important. So apologies for this is me in the top right-hand corner of your screen over here. Before we continue, just don't forget, press the like button, press the subscription button, and also the little blue bell, and you'll be reminded of future conversations here on the Grand Torino. And without further ado, with great aplomb, I want to welcome Dr. E. Michael Jones. Dr. Jones, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So we spoke briefly there.
Thank
just
you.
had a
Good
quick
to be here.
snapshot of the conversation we want to tie in. And yourself being German, you have German, part German, part Irish. You have great connection to Ireland here. You've written so many great books. I want to direct people to the great Owen Benjamin, the Big Bear, and the recent conversation you had with him. I'll link it in the description box. The thorough understanding of Logos and how that's helped me come back to my Catholic faith again, and also to understand the reason or the understanding of Logos and what it is. And also your recent conversation with Roosh, which I think is very important for the young men and young women of these times, specifically to get engaged with that conversation in regards to pornography and the breaking down of the family unit. I thought that was a fascinating conversation as well, Dr. Jones, and I thoroughly recommend it. Like I say, I'll link that in the description box below. But going back to what we just discussed, Dr. Jones, the hate speech legislation that's happening in Germany, the undermining of the Catholic ethos here in Ireland, and the complete control by media, and the sacred cow that can't be touched over here, that they're not being mentioned. Can you extrapolate from your point of view how we see the same game plan rolling out here in Ireland as what's already happened in Germany, please?
Yes, I can. As you mentioned, I happen to be biracial. I'm half Irish and half German, which gives me a genetic predisposition to multiple personality disorder. But it also allows me to talk about both countries. And that's important because if you want to know the future in Ireland, look at Germany. Germany had the misfortune to be conquered by the United States of America. It was called World War II. And it wasn't just enough to conquer those people militarily. The United States at that moment in time decided that they had to conquer them spiritually, psychologically, and culturally. And the name that we put all of these headings under is called social engineering. This was the high watermark of social engineering. This is, don't take my word for it, take the word of Gunnar Myrdal. The book was called The American Dilemma. Gunnar Myrdal did not write that book. Gunnar Myrdal was a Swedish socialist who was brought over by the big foundations, the Carnegie Foundation in particular, to introduce social engineering to the American people. He said very frankly in that book, decisions that you made during the war or before the war, you will not be able to make anymore. You will not be able to make unfettered decisions about where you want to live, how you want to live, where your children go to school, and so on and so forth. He was very frank about the principle, but he did not go into the details. If you wanted the details at that time, you really had to go to Germany. And Germany, the story began in Germany in 1947. The war has been over for 2 years, and there's a man in power in the United States. His name is Henry Morgenthau. Morgenthau has the plan for Germany. It's called the Morgenthau Plan. Morgenthau is the Jewish Secretary of Treasury under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He had some magic control over Roosevelt's mind. He could do whatever he wanted, and the Morgenthau Plan was his plan for Germany. It was, in short, Jewish revenge against the German people. Morgenthau was going to starve them to death. And if you don't believe me, go type in Hungerjahr. Hungerjahr, the Hunger Year, 1946-47, the winter of 46-47, when the German people almost starved to death. If it were for Morgenthau, there were warehouses full of food. There were trains with coal in it, and none of this was going to the German people. And thank God for Cardinal Frings of Cologne, who told the German people, you have a right to take that food. It's not stealing. It's not theft. It was exactly analogous to what happened in Ireland during the potato famine. It's the exact analogy of that. The English were exporting food from Ireland and the Irish were starving to death. The Irish had a right to take that food. It was not theft. Germany was exactly the same situation. The occupying powers had food in their warehouses and they were not sharing it with the German people because of Morgenthau's plan to starve them to death. Now, at this point, there were people, the adults in the room in America woke up, and Morgenthau got shoved aside, and a new plan was put into operation, and this was called the Marshall Plan. They did this not, it's simply, I'm sure there were humanitarian motives behind this, but the main reason was that they realized that if we starve Germany to death, the Soviet Union will take over all of Europe. The United States needed Germany as a bulwark against communism, and so they instituted the Marshall Plan, and now suddenly food and money starts to flow into Germany. This did not mean that everything was going to be fine, that they had given up on the idea of changing the German people. All they had done was change the method, okay? And now the method in place was social engineering. Now, I cover this in a book I just did called Werner Heisenberg and Jewish Science. It's available on Amazon Kindle as an ebook. So it's easy to order in Ireland, okay? But at this point, the Germans need money. At the very moment that they introduced the currency reform, the Währungsreform, 20 tons of pornography come across the Austrian border, so that the Germans have something to buy. So from the beginning of this, even under the Marshall Plan, the plan was always there to corrupt the morals of the German people. That was from the beginning, and the Jews were put in charge of this moral corruption. There was a Jewish psychiatrist from New York City by the name of David Mordecai Levy. He was in charge of the office of I think it was called Correct Thinking. It's in the book. It's some type Orwellian name, but anyway, every magazine, every newspaper, every TV show, every movie, every book had to get a license. Whoever published it or produced it had to get a license from David Mordecai Levy. And David Mordecai Levy was the Jewish psychiatrist, made them lie down on the couch, and they had to write an essay about how bad the Germans were and how guilty they should feel. That meant that everything that came out after that was sort of passed through this lens. So at this point, the German magazines all of a sudden start promoting sexual liberation. The main proponent of that was Dr. Kinsey, the famous bug doctor from Indiana, where I live right now, the University of Indiana. The Kinsey report came out, and suddenly every single German magazine had illustrated articles about how sex, all your ideas about sex were wrong. There was no such thing as sexual morality. Everything was okay. And these articles were illustrated with pictures that broke the law. But because it was science, hey, who are we to break the law? I mean, who are we to say that you can't put these pictures in? And so the science was used as the thin end of the wedge to corrupt the morals of the German people. Why is that important? Because sexual liberation is a form of political control. They tried it out, and the Germans were the guinea pigs in the 1950s. The Americans were the guinea pigs in the 1960s when I was in high school and college, and now the Irish are the guinea pigs. The Irish are now told that they should go to the polls and vote for gay marriage, which is a ridiculous fiction, and vote for abortion. The Irish are the guinea pigs. The plan is the same, and the purpose is the same, which is sexual liberation as a form of political control. Now, the Catholic Church in Germany had an organization called the Volkswartbund. It was the Legion of Decency for Germany. and they were blindsided. They didn't know what to say. They were thinking about Schmutz und Schund. It's embarrassing. The Germans were embarrassed. It's like filth and smut.
Yeah.
And Kinsey talking about science, and all the magazines are talking about science, and here the Catholics are talking about Schmutz and Schund, and the priests are embarrassed by it. They're embarrassed, and so they abandon their own organization, and the social engineers take over Germany and create the sexual revolution. In Germany in 1973, as you're of English, not far from where you were in the British occupation zone. I was on the Lower Rhine on race, not far from Dortmund. And all of my girl students are reading Bravo. Bravo is this teen magazine which has an advice columnist whose name is Dr. Sommer, who tells them to masturbate. Dr. Sommer's real name was Martin Weinstein. Okay? So I'm dropped into a war zone. I just come from America. I think I'm dropped in the middle of a war zone, and I'm walking around, and there are all these movies like Der Schulmädchen Report. They did 13 of these movies. They're all softcore porn, and they're all geared to corrupt the sexual morals of German teenage girls. I was teaching them at the time. I saw this firsthand.
This is happening now, Dr. Jones. I mean to cut across now. We just recently had a drag act group here called Glitter Hole, and the name itself has connotations to the deviancy of glitter. The avatar is a naked rear end, and they're doing the same as what's happening in the United States, where these drag queens are coming in to read children's stories to children. Now that to me was a huge red flag, and it was protested. It was in a public library. It was due to be held. Some local councillors, even after people had rang up and said that they were unhappy about this going ahead, that the people that it even were supposed to read were unvetted by the Garda Síochána, that they hadn't been checked, their credentials hadn't been checked. And lo and behold, when you go back and look at what happened in the United States, most of the people that were there were actual pedophiles. They actually had previous records for endangering children. And here we have, as you say, the same game plan slowly being drip fed under the guise of transgenderism and respect and diversity, and they're attacking our children. In our schools, as you just mentioned, sorry, one more quick, I've heard rampant stories that they're now educating the young teenagers by displaying pornography to explain to them the sex. Little in regards to the damage that it does, to understand that pornography is the destruction of the young virile minds and the sexual appetite to destroy the family unit.
That's right. That's right. And there are all kinds of similarities. The other similarity is that the church didn't know what to do. And I'm saying that one of the people who didn't know what to do was Joseph Ratzinger. Cardinal, no, he's now Pope Benedict XVI Emeritus. He just wrote an article about the cause of the sexual crisis in the church is the sexual revolution of the 1960s. And then he talks about being in Regensburg, walking down the street in Regensburg in 1970, and suddenly there's a movie, everybody's flocking into the movie, and outside there's a picture of a naked man and a naked woman in a kind of an embrace. And he says, this was the beginning of the whole thing. Well, no, it wasn't the beginning of the whole thing. It was not the beginning of the whole thing. And I don't know why you're saying that, because you were there when it happened before that. And the real tragedy here turned on its own organization. The Catholic Church was embarrassed by the Volkswartbund in Germany because all they were talking about was Schmutz und Schund, and everybody wanted to go to those dirty movies because that was science. And the point of my book is that there was one man in Germany who could have said something, and that was Werner Heisenberg, because he won the Nobel Prize in physics, and he didn't. Everyone was intimidated. Either they were embarrassed. I think they felt that it was beneath their dignity to talk about this type of stuff. It was smut. It was why we're not at, which I can understand. But by the same token, if it's in every single movie theater, and all your students are going to watch it, You're crazy if you don't talk about it. That was the situation. Now, that's not the same vocabulary that we're using now. Those movies are naive, and they're kind of wholesome compared to the crap that we are expected to accept now. There was not there. You go to those movies, and there's jokes about homosexuality in those movies. That's just the sign of the times of what it was then. It's the same plan. It's just a different vocabulary. So in Ireland, what did James Joyce say about Ireland? Ireland is a priest-ridden people. Okay? You did it because the priest told you to do it. You stayed on the straight and narrow because the priest told you to do it. Well, guess what? The priest can get corrupted too. He's got his own sexual appetites, and what you saw in the United States of America was a deliberate campaign to corrupt the morals of the priesthood. Okay? Wilhelm Reich proposed this campaign. He said it explicitly in his book, The Mass Psychology of Fascism. Reich is a Jew in Austria who was both a psychiatrist and a communist. And he was trying to mobilize people for a revolution, and nobody was interested in communism, but everybody's interested in talking about sex. And so he said, don't argue with a priest about the existence of God. Corrupt his morals, and the idea of God will evaporate from his mind. That's what happened in the United States. Okay? You had a large number of priests. Most people have normal appetites, and so most priests wanted to marry a woman. When they did that, they had to leave. What that did was concentrate the percentage of homosexuality within the priesthood, leading to the crisis we have right now, where we have a homosexual mafia basically blocking any type of effective action on the part of the church. The headquarters of that homosexual mafia are the Jesuit order. Okay? So in the United States of America, James Martin in particular, why does he get to preach homosexuality? Well, because the homosexual mafia protects him. The whole Cardinal McCarrick story coming out over the summer, last summer, okay? It was Archbishop Vigano who said, this is a homosexual mafia. How could you get to be a homosexual and get to the highest position in the church, become a cardinal of the church, if there's not some type of organization promoting you and fostering you? This is the situation that Ireland needs to confront. Okay? This is the problem in Ireland. I don't know what happened to Dermot Martin. I mean, I knew him in the 80s when he was the assistant to Cardinal Gagnon, and now he's Cardinal Archbishop of Dublin, and people ask him, is it okay to vote for gay marriage? And he doesn't give a position on this. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know what happened to him, but it was his job to tell the people gay marriage is psychological warfare. This is warfare against the Catholic Church. It is warfare against the Catholic people of Ireland as a prelude to controlling the people of Ireland by controlling them through their passions. This is a story I tell in Libido Dominandi, Sexual Liberation and Political Control.
And we've got now the, as you described with Owen Benjamin, the proxy soldiers of the oligarchs. We now have our own gay prime minister, and regardless of his sexual orientation like that, but he will push and enforce that ethos that is being pushed on us with the transgenderism, the diversity, but it's just a useful tool. It's there to control us, to make us, as I find, and many other YouTubers. I know you were on recently with the Don and critiqued, and it was a fascinating conversation there again in Ireland as well. But I wanted to try and hone in on how the language now, that we're so controlled, and we are nearing towards critical mass as they are in Germany, where people are definitely afraid to speak or say anything out of turn. Even though when you step outside your front door, as I found when I walked the streets, the reality is completely different to what the media portrays as to what can be said. You know, Germany is, and I have great affection, as I say, I was there, loved the German people and of that time in the 90s, but to see it now sort of emasculated, and it's disheartening to speak about it. But I want to mention, Dr. Jones, I did go to a beer festival, and what is being spoken about there is that the younger generations, the young 15s up to 20-year-olds, are actually coming back to their conservatism. They actually go back to the natural attire, the traditional clothings when they go to the beer fest. Whereas before they were very laissez-faire. They might wear jeans and t-shirts. Now they're braiding their hair. They're wearing the girls are wearing the dresses in more so, and they're trying to re-establish their culture, because I feel the middle generation, whatever generation that is, the political class has them completely kowtowed. So I see
Yes,
it as an expression of the new
that's right.
rising in conservatism in Europe, as it is,
Yes,
as it's becoming now. Now,
that's right.
before you mention on that again, I'm fascinated by this logos, and I would love for you just to explain my Irish viewers the use of reason to come to an understanding, to talk about the things that we cannot talk about, the sacred cows that the Big Bear smashes, that Vox Day. I don't know if you've spoken about Vox Day. Him and Big Bear are owner in collaboration, breaking away from YouTube, and then Roosh's understanding of how it took him a lifetime. I was pretty much in that similar sort of track that Roosh experienced, that multiple partners and all that kind of stuff. But when I was committed in a relationship, I was committed because I still had my Catholic ethos that I was raised upon. So monogamy was very important to me, trust and love. But when the relationship disintegrated, the herd mentality was there again, and you followed what would seem to be cool. To not appreciate monogamy, the family, the strength in friendships and
Yeah,
community. You went back to
yeah,
this hedonism again.
yeah. Let's go back to what I said about the priest. Did you do it because the priest said so? Well, the question is, why did the priest say so? The priest said that because he was a member of the Catholic Church, which was established by Jesus Christ on earth to guide us to salvation. Now, the crucial moment in history came when St. John wrote his gospel in Greek, because what he did by doing that was adopt all of previous Greek philosophy, baptized it, said it was worthy to continue, and also we need this language to understand God. And what's the primary word we need to understand God? It's logos. And so we have the Gospel of St. John beginning with the sentence, in the beginning there was logos. Now, I didn't understand. That's not what you read in the Bible. You read in the Bible, in the beginning there was the word. Well, logos does mean word. That's true. But if you say in the beginning was the word, I haven't the faintest idea of what you're talking about. Okay? And then you say, and the word was with God, and the word was God. Okay, I still don't understand what you're talking about. And I did not understand what he was talking about until I got to college and I started studying Greek. And then I suddenly opened the Liddell Scott Greek Dictionary, and there are 5 pages of English equivalents to the one word Greek word logos. And I suddenly realized there is a whole universe, literally, behind this word. Logos is literally talks about the order of the universe. This is what the Greeks did on their own. The Hebrews had God as their tutor. God would talk to the Hebrews. God spoke to Moses face to face. And when Moses asked him who he was, God said, I am who am, which means I am self-subsistent being. Well, Parmenides among the Greeks was talking about being. He's the first man who really understood being, and he said, that which is cannot come from that which is not, which is a profound statement. And you see this moving ahead, and what St. John did was basically unite these two streams of thought into the most powerful vehicle for logos in the history of mankind, which is the Catholic Church. So why did the priests say it? Because it was true. And because it was the logos, and the Catholic Church is the vehicle of logos. So now we all have to grow up and realize, well, just because the priest did something bad doesn't mean you can throw out what he said, because it goes a lot deeper than that. And if you want to use that as an excuse to go screw somebody at the gay disco, well, you can do that because the will is free, but all you're doing is locking yourself in your own cell. And that's the moment we have reached right now. When you talk to people like Roosh, Roosh decided to go out and screw as many women as he could. He was the Don Juan of the 21st century. Nell'Espagna, 1003. Okay, he screwed 1,003 women in Spain alone. Okay, and he He woke up and realized, I'm not happy. How is this possible? How can I not be happy doing this? And suddenly he came to understand that there is a logos to sex as well. Okay? Now, the fundamental fact about the logos of sex is between a man and a woman. Okay? So I guarantee you, if you're having sex at the gay disco, you are not going to be happy. You're not even close. There is no remote possibility of this leading to any type of happiness. If you're having sex with a woman, there are certain, there's a logos to that as well. There is a logos to the human body. Sex was meant to be between a man and a woman. It was meant, it creates this bond. You feel attracted to these people, you know, and that's because to fulfill this, there has to be a lifelong bond.
And the creation of life, ultimately the creation of life.
That's the next thing I was going to say is, and the next logos of sex is it leads to the creation of new life. So if you exclude that possibility of new life, you're acting like a homosexual, and you will end up unhappy like a homosexual. And by that, I mean the use of contraception. Every single act of intercourse has to be within a marriage between a man and a woman who are open to new life. If it is not all of those things, it will lead to unhappiness sooner or later.
I can see multiple heads exploding as you say them words on certain people that will come back and I'm talking about here in Ireland. You know, anybody that's followed your work or anybody that's seen any of your other interviews will be aware of this kind of the conversation that we're having. But here in Ireland, where I'll say it, the gay mafia is in full effect here. You know, it's inserted in the councils, it's inserted in government, it's the derriere political go-to, and any talk against it or to push back against it is deemed as racism, and you're slandered, you're vilified, your job opportunities are gone. But that is one of the frontline soldiers that is here now. But we've also got the Islamic frontline soldiers here as well. We've got the Muslim Brotherhood firmly embedded here with their European headquarters stationed here. And I bring that through because of the recent conversation I heard. Toby Young, a journalist, was speaking in defence of Sir Roger Scruton, who was recently had his knighthood removed because he criticised Islam, and he spoke truth. He spoke with his logos, but he was dismissed as having, because of his age at 74, he wasn't going to be of a progressive nature and come to understand the way things are. And I thought that was pitiful to just dismiss his logos, his own logos, which is the virtue of our societies, to talk about these difficult subjects. And we'd have these two competing ideas, and one will ultimately assume the other, whether they like it or not. Once they get rid of the Christian, once they get rid of the Catholic ethos, which I believe is the game plan, that the stronger ideology, which will be the Islam, will assume the toxicity of diversity.
Yeah. I got contact with, I got people from all over the world talking to me. So it's suddenly I'm talking to, I'm not going to use a real name. Let's say her name is Maureen, and she's from Boston. Okay, Maureen is like the woman at the well. She comes to me and she says to me, "You told me everything I've ever done." Okay, because I wrote books about it. So what was her story? She grew up on a street in Dorchester in Boston where every single person on that street was an Irish Catholic. And she looked upon it as the only community she ever knew in her life, where they looked out for each other. And when she fell and hurt her, cut her forehead, the entire neighborhood made sure that she got to her parents and she was taken care of. That was destroyed. That kind of ethnic enclave was destroyed by racial migration in the United States. The black people in the United States were used as proxy warriors by the Ford Foundation, specifically by the Ford Foundation, to break up Catholic neighborhoods, because after World War II, the oligarchs in the United States were worried about Catholic political power. And their worries got even stronger when John F. Kennedy, an Irish Catholic, got elected. So what happened when Maureen what happened when the black people arrived? Maureen left. Their block was ethnically cleansed, okay? And she went to the suburbs. What happens when you go to the suburbs? An Irishman becomes white when he gets to the suburbs. The Polak becomes white. The Italian becomes white. Madison Grant would be turning over in his grave. Whoever thought Italians could be white? Madison Grant didn't think so, but this is what happened to all those people. And this was the purpose of the suburbs, to turn Catholic ethnics into white people who have no values, who are disrupted, who get all their ideas from television on their front step. It happened. It's because this is the plan. I'm talking about the plan. So if you want to know the future, think of what happened in Ireland. I'm sorry, in Boston and then in Germany. So what happened when Maureen moves to the suburbs? She's lonely. What happens when you're lonely? You have sex. So she becomes sexually active at 15. Okay, because her world has been disrupted. That calms down a little bit, and then it bursts out again when she goes to college, and she becomes completely involved in the sexual revolution. This is the 1980s now. Okay, and she has multiple sex partners, and over a 5-year period, she has 3 abortions. 3. Because every sexual encounter now is supposed to be transient and sterile. And you're supposed to act like a homosexual even if you're not. So what happens then? She becomes a lesbian. She's disgusted. So this is the new phase, okay? And she moves in with a black lesbian. And they are a couple for 14 years until the black lesbian says, objects because she's spending too much time with nephews because her sister's dying of cancer. And suddenly this whole charade just collapses before her eyes. And so now Maureen starts going out with men. And it turns out she links up with an African from Ghana. So you tell me, what's the next phase? What's the next plan here? What's the next step? What happened to Maureen at that point?
That whole relationship would come back down. I'd say she's gone beyond having the chance of having birth or having a family. So the relationship left because her other partner left and went off and had multiple partners.
That's right. It didn't eventuate in a family, but it did have a change on her life. She became a Muslim. There you have the whole trajectory. I said, Maureen, the only difference between Boston and England is that that's an exception in Boston and it's kind of the rule in England. I've talked to so many women in England whose lives were out of control because of sex and booze, and Islam comes in and it's the tyrant that's going to restore order to your life. Because
the strong man in their life, the strong person in their life, or the strong ideology that will stand up and say no. But little to their understanding, you're not equal. You're property.
That's right.
You're only half the person.
I am not. I don't think you can talk to anyone who has spent more time with Muslims than I have. I've been to Iran a number of times. I respect these people. I think that what the United States is doing to them is terrible. But the point here is that Islam in Europe is being orchestrated by the Jews to destroy European culture in exactly the same way that the Jews, through the civil rights movement, used black people as their proxy warriors to destroy Catholic neighborhoods. It is the same plan. It's happening in Europe right now.
But bringing it back to the Irish context, Dr. Jones, how are they going to, with the new block of cultures coming in and the new different colours, the ethos, how are they going to convince the Irish, the indigenous Irish here, that they're supposed to be guilty for some sort of slave trade that happened on when we were one of the original victims of slavery, and then because of the marketing that goes on out here and the propaganda by our state organisations, the fluoridation, which some of us are now beginning to talk about. Sorry, and I'll get there quickly.
Yeah,
what? Go ahead, sir.
Do you know the magic formula?
No.
Convince the Irish that they're white.
Yeah.
As soon as you accept the fact that you're white, you're guilty of racism. This is exactly what's going on. How do you become white? You become white by walking out of the Catholic Church. As soon as you leave the Catholic Church, you left your identity as an Irishman behind, and now you're white. And because you're white, you're guilty of racism. That's the way it's going to work in Ireland. That's exactly what happened in America to the Irish in America. They left their neighborhoods, they went to the suburbs, they became white, and as soon as you're white, you're guilty. So what? So go ahead.
I was just going to say, to defeat that, or to help other, to help the people that aren't tuning in to the bigger game plan, that are just doing their 9 to 5, and they see these little interactions on YouTube, because most people that I speak to, that they're not engaging in the social media, they just want to be left alone, as most people do. But to reach out to them, say, you may not necessarily believe in God, you may, you have your thing, but to defend Christianity, to defend the church, not to castigate it for the sins of the few priests, and the sins that were done, to the way the government is manipulating the guilt of the Catholic. And the elderly Catholic now still go to their churches, still have great relationships with their priests, and there are many, many great priests. But the ethos of Catholicism has been destroyed. And before we finish out, Dr. Jones, I want you to bring your attention to the Pope Francis, and we will round off on him, how much of a complete globalist he is, and pushing that on, and how detrimental he is to Ireland, and the church itself as a whole institution. But I want him on is more people to speak with Logos that are on YouTube, that are thinking about YouTube, because I get contacted when I do my different interviews around the country. I'm really thinking about doing. I want to do what you're doing, but they're afraid to go through the baptism of fire that I go through, where your life is destroyed, your families are exposed, you're castigated as racist, fascist, without any shred of evidence and without any common sense of Logos reasoning. But it's people like, I'm not putting myself on the victim card. I do it gladly. That's why I do it. But I want more people to understand the Logos is to stand up and speak your truth and let the dice fall where they may.
Yeah. The Catholic Church is the vehicle of Logos through human history. That has been, if it weren't for the Catholic Church, we would not have science, because it was the Catholic Church that created secondary causality through Thomas Aquinas, that understood the universe, because the universe is a manifestation of the Trinity, and the Trinity is a manifestation of Logos. And if you don't understand the Trinity, you won't have science. That's why the Muslims don't have science and the Christians do, because they understood the Trinity. So at the same time, you have a choice now. This is when Civiltà Cattolica did the 3-part series on the Jewish question in 1890. It was a reflection on the French Revolution. We've had 100 years of the French Revolution. What was the net result? We are enslaved by Jews. That's why they were writing on the Jewish question. This is the Catholic Church, the official magazine of the Catholic Church, talking about the Jewish question. And
people conflate, sorry, Dr. Jones, people conflate this understanding of Judeo-Christian values. There's no such thing as Judeo-Christian. There's Christian and there's Judeo, and they don't work hand in hand, from my understanding.
That's right. So don't use that term.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't use that term. Okay, so you have a choice. I've said this to my friends in Australia when they were getting ready to vote on gay marriage. I said, your great-grandfather knew that he was taken from Ireland and put on a prison ship and sent to Australia as a penal colony. He knew it was a penal colony. You don't, because now it's a neo-penal colony. Now it's not the British Empire, it's the American Empire. And how do you know that you're in a penal colony? Because you're voting for gay marriage. Because the difference between you and your great-grandfather is that he knew why he was there. He stole Trevelyan's corn, okay? And they put him on a prison ship, okay? And what do? You take the key and you lock yourself in your cell every night. There's only one way out of that, whether you're Irish in Australia or you're Irish in Ireland, and that is the Catholic Church. That's the only thing that's going to save you. Now, if you can complain about Pope Francis, but we're back at square one. He's a priest. Is it true because the priest says it? Or is the priest the representative of Logos, which is eternal and a manifestation of God's mind, which you can access too because you have a mind too? Or are you going to let yourself be put in the new prison cell? The new prison cell is known as the gay disco. That's the new prison cell. So wake up to it.
And it's kind of reinforced by the analogy that I've come across, the panopticon, whereas the one prison guard can supervise the whole of the inmates because of the looking glass, where you feel you're being. That's where technology is going to come in, where you're surveilled and you're monitored, and you're controlled, and your language is controlled because you're in the panopticon, which was a prison, back in the day. The ideology that one prison guard could monitor the whole prison cell, because you felt like, because humans interacted they felt they were being watched all the time. They changed their habits and they changed their mindset
Yeah.
because they felt they were under 24-hour surveillance. And I see it. I don't know how you are for time there,
Go ahead.
Dr. Jones, but go ahead, sir. Go ahead, sir. Just for our last few minutes, if there was any message, as you said, look to Germany for the direction that we could be heading if we don't avert it. People to understand the rise in nationalism and patriotism and their own Christian morality, their morality more so, whether you ascribe to Catholicism or not. To ascribe yourself to be progressive is not to be moral, is my point.
It's a subversion of morality. There's only one. What is morality? It's practical reason. Okay, it's reason. It's logos. It is the way you achieve the good. The only way you can achieve the good is by following the rules of morality, which are also practical reason. If you ignore them, you are destroying your existence as a rational creature. Every instance of immorality is an instance of irrationality. Okay, the controllers know this. The controllers know this, and that's why they are promoting sexual liberation, because it derails your mind. It derails your ability to think clearly. Thomas Aquinas would say that lust darkens the mind. That's exactly what it does. Now, why is that in their interest? Because if your mind is dark, you can't see what they're doing. You don't know what they're doing. And I'm telling you again, the Catholic Church still has not awakened to the fact that there was psychological warfare, and there was a psychological warfare campaign waged against them, and it's being waged today. And the result of the defeat of the Catholic Church is the enslavement of the Irish people in a new prison, the new penal colony. The gay disco is the new penal colony. That's what the Irish are going to have to figure out on their own. Or they're just going to say, well, I guess the alternative is the gay disco, which is the new penal colony.
Okay, Dr. Jones, I know you're under pressure there, so I'm going to wind it down there. I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for joining me and allowing me to have this discussion with you. I feel pretty privileged to speak with the man that spoke with the Rouge, that spoke with the. I'm a great fan of Owen Benjamin and Vox Day and many other great YouTubers, but I'm a huge fan of yourself and your understandings. And I encourage people to go and check out your books on Amazon. Libido. Could you just list off some of the books that are available?
Yes. So let's go back to Maureen in Boston. The first book that described her plight was The Slaughter of Cities, Urban Renewal as Ethnic Cleansing, which described the social engineering that destroyed her neighborhood. The second milestone in her life was sexual liberation. I wrote Libido Dominandi, Sexual Liberation and Political Control, to talk about that phase of social engineering, which is what happened in Germany after the war. Okay? I wrote the book, Werner Heisenberg and Jewish Science, to give you all of the details about what happened in Germany after the war, because it's going to happen. It's happening in Ireland right now. Different vocabulary, but it's still the same plan. Okay? The Jewish revolutionary spirit will put these pieces together because these are the architects of all of these revolutionary movements. I've said it before, but the Jews are behind gay marriage. If I say that, they call me an anti-Semite, but the Jews say it themselves. Okay? There's a double standard here. To talk about the situation in Ireland, the historical situation in Ireland, I wrote Barren Metal, A History of Capitalism, as the conflict between labor and usury, which has chapters on the Irish potato famine. Okay, there's a YouTube talk of me giving the whole talk of the priest crisis in Dublin. I gave this talk in Dublin in 2009. You can probably still access it.
I'll stick that in the description box below. Make sure it's there so people can see it.
Yeah, put the link there. And then if you've got questions, if anybody's got questions, I'm happy to answer the questions. We can do this again.
I would love to do that. But we'll organise that for a live stream, and then because I know many of my audience, my subscribers, particularly in Ireland, had a rake of questions to ask you. But I just wanted you to get over here and get this ethos of Logos and the situation in Ireland as you see it, and as I hope for, detail the plan going forward in the future, what we could affect and how we can change it. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jones, I'm going to thank you one more time. Thank you very much for joining me, and we will do this again as soon as possible. and we'll see you all again on the Grand Torino in the next episode. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure.